I realized that what we were doing, that low calorie, high intensity, it just wasn't working. So that moment really changed everything for me in my own personal fitness and in the way that I was coaching hundreds of women. And so there was this shift for me into heavy strength training. And I started to realize that, burpees and broad jumps and all of these really intense things are okay in moderation, but the thing that women need is heavy strength training. They need to be progressively overloading their bodies and getting stronger every week by using the barbell. And really, I think that is the most underutilized tool for women in their strength training. And a lot of women are afraid of the barbell, and they walk into the gym and they think, I would never go to that area. That's only for men. And so I'm here to tell you that the barbell is not just for men, it's for women as well. One morning when I was in my early 20s, I was heading in to coach a women's boot camp at the time. And so in this women's boot camp, we ran 4 to 6 week challenges, and we just crushed these women. They were doing high intensity interval training, they were doing sprint training, and these women showed up, they worked their hardest every single day, but something just wasn't clicking. So they followed a diet that we had prescribed, which was very low calorie. And as you might have guessed, they had very little energy. And over time, I realized something just wasn't working well. We were having these women come in and crush themselves. They were on low calorie diets, and yet they weren't seeing results. They might lose a little bit of weight, and then after the challenge was over, they would gain it right back. And I started to think like, this can't be the right way. And so fast forward to Tiffany, and you go back to that 4 a.m. at the gym, and I was walking in and I peeked around the corner, and there was my boss, Tiffany, the woman that every single woman that walked into the gym at that time wanted to look like. She was toned, she was fit, she was lean, she had muscles, and she was strong. And everyone would come in and say, I want to look just like Tiffany. And it started to click for me that she wasn't doing what we were asking our clients to do. She wasn't out there doing circuit training, she wasn't out there doing burpees. She was lifting heavy weights. A lot of women have been fed the lie that they need to lift light weights, they need to do a lot of what's called toning, or they do things like Pilates, and they think that that's the answer to building muscle, but it's not. In order to build muscle and tone your body, you need to lift heavy weights. And yet most women are still stuck in that same cycle. They're stuck in the cycle of doing really high intensity boot camp style workouts or excessive cardio, or doing the same thing over and over, hoping to get the same results. And they're just really stuck in that burnout cycle. And what they don't realize is that they just need to do heavy strength training 3 times a week, and they need to do it consistently. Because here's what no one tells you, that crash dieting and those boot camp style workouts, they're not just stripping fat, they're actually stripping muscle too, which is not what you want. And then often after you stop that crazy diet that you're doing, or stop doing those super intense exercises that you're doing 5 days a week, then not only do you gain back fat, but you actually don't even gain back the muscle. So you're actually worse off than when you started. And that over time really wreaks havoc on your metabolism. According to Stanford's Longevity Center, women lose about 40% of their muscle mass between the ages of 20 to 80. And that accelerates even more after menopause. Sarcopenia, or age-related muscle loss, actually starts to really increase drastically. And that can even happen not even just with menopause, but it can happen also when we're bedbound, when we're chronically inactive, or when we do a lot of crash dieting. And just 10 days of bed rest can lead to a 10% loss in muscle mass in your legs. And that even accelerates more as you age. And so if you're 30 and you're in bed for a week, it might not be as bad, but if you're 70 and you're in bed for a week, your muscle mass in your legs will drastically decrease. One study published in the Journal of Physiology found that after just 2 weeks of inactivity, older adults lost about 30% of their muscle mass in their legs, which is incredibly alarming. And here's why this is especially important for women. So women naturally have less testosterone than men, which makes it even harder for us to build muscle. However, we do have estrogen in our bodies, and a lot more estrogen than men do, which does allow us to build muscle. And so we want to use that estrogen for muscle building. But after menopause, estrogen drops off almost completely. And that estrogen drop off means that we have to work even harder to build strength and to maintain our muscle mass and our metabolism. I hope what you're gathering so far is that muscle is not optional for women. It's essential, and it's essential for our health and our longevity. The good news is this, is that even post-menopause, studies show that women can still build and maintain muscle mass well past their 70s. And so that's great news, because even if hormones fluctuate, there are still ways and levers that you can pull in order to build and keep muscle mass. So next, let's break down why hormones matter for muscle building and strength, and when they matter, at what stage and what age you're at, and then how you can optimize that for your training and your recovery. So we can't talk about building muscle without talking about hormones. Hormones play a vital role in our body's ability to build muscle. And so let's go ahead and break down some of those different muscle building hormones that really help to optimize strength gains. First, let's talk about estrogen. So this is really our muscles' ally, especially for women. We have a lot more estrogen in our bodies than men do, and this really helps with building muscle. It helps with recovery. It can help with joint stiffness, and it really just helps with your metabolism. So it helps you to build muscle and lose body fat. So when estrogen is high, like during ovulation, so the first part of your cycle, often women feel stronger. They're in an optimal state to build muscle and strength. And then after ovulation, when estrogen is lower, you'll notice things like you feel more sluggish, or recovery is a little bit more challenging. So the next hormone we're going to talk about is progesterone. So as progesterone rises, that really affects our body's ability to build muscle. So estrogen drops down after we ovulate, progesterone rises, and progesterone is not an anabolic hormone, which means it doesn't directly build muscle, but it does affect our body's ability to recover. It affects our sleep, our deep sleep, and really just inflammation. And so as progesterone rises, just be aware in your training and in your recovery that things might feel a little bit more challenging, and you might need to actually back off during that time in your cycle in order to just optimize your health, and you need to focus a little bit more on recovery during that period. Now let's talk about testosterone. So women do have testosterone, though not nearly as much as men do. It still plays a vital role in building muscle in their bodies. And so testosterone helps with building muscle. It really helps with recovery. And then it also helps with just training hard. And so the more testosterone you have, the more strong you'll feel, the more quickly you'll build muscle, and you'll also notice that your recovery happens more quickly. And so after menopause, usually testosterone will drop just like estrogen. And so it's not completely gone, but that just means that we need to be a little bit more strategic about how we train and recover post-menopause. Next, we're going to talk about IGF-1, or insulin-like growth factor 1. And this is really important for helping our bodies to deliver nutrients to our muscles. And so this can be triggered by 3 things that you have control over, which is awesome. It's triggered by strength training, eating enough protein, and getting enough deep sleep. All 3 things are things that you can change and have control over. And the last hormone we're going to talk about is insulin. So insulin really helps your body to deliver nutrients and fuel to your muscle cells. However, over time, if you become more insulin insensitive, then your body just essentially won't get as much fuel to your muscles, which makes it harder for you to build muscle. And so you really want to optimize your insulin sensitivity. And we're going to get into that a little bit more later about how you can do that nutritionally and with your sleep and with your strength training. This is also known as insulin resistance. And so really, to optimize building muscle, you really want to be insulin sensitive, not insulin resistant. So why do hormones matter? As you might have guessed already from all the different hormones that we talked about, they influence our muscle building in so many different ways. And next, we're going to get into how those hormones affect us at different stages of our life. So the first stage of a woman's life is adolescence, as a woman goes through puberty. So this is really when she has the first rise in estrogen. There's a big surge in estrogen, and this is a really optimal time for women to build strength, to build bone, to build tendon elasticity. And unfortunately, because of our culture, women are not focused on building muscle and building strength and building strong bones in this stage of our life, because a lot of girls and women in adolescence really focus on being skinny. They want to be thin, and culture tells them that they have to look a certain way. And so they kind of miss this opportunity when their body has a lot more estrogen and they're primed to build muscle. And so this is a great time, if you have any adolescents or young women in your life, to get them strength training. It doesn't necessarily have to be super challenging at this stage, but just getting them used to those strength training movements, really honing in on your form and focusing on making it a part of your daily life and your weekly routine. The second phase in a woman's life is her reproductive years. So this is in her 20s and 30s, and this is really the sweet spot for muscle building. So during this phase, women have more estrogen and more progesterone. So again, during that estrogen phase, really focus on building strength. Optimize that time in your cycle to build muscle, to train really hard. And then during the time when you have higher progesterone, maybe back it off on your workouts a little bit and focus more on your recovery. Don't take strength training out. Still consistently do it 3 times a week, and really use this time as a time in your life to build muscle, to build bone, to increase your tendon strength, and that'll really help you for the rest of your life. The next phase of life is perimenopause. So this is like your late 30s to your early 50s, and this is when hormones start to, like a lot of women will say, go crazy. So women will start to notice things like they're more tired, they're more irritable, it's harder to recover from workouts, and that's because your hormones are no longer following that estrogen rise and decrease in progesterone, but sometimes estrogen can stay high for a really long time, or progesterone stays really elevated. And so women will often have sleep issues, they'll get things like night sweats, more cramping, and they're really just more uncomfortable. But I want to encourage you, this is not the time to stop strength training. This is actually the time to start doing it. So if you're in this phase of life and you haven't started doing it, now is the time. This will really help you to build and maintain the muscle you already have, because as you'll learn in the next phase of life, post-menopause, it gets even a little bit harder to build muscle. So the next phase of life is post-menopause. So that's after you've stopped having a period or menstruating for at least 12 months. And in this time, you often see a sharp decrease in estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So what happens when that estrogen drops off and the testosterone drops off? So unfortunately, there tends to be more fat that infiltrates our muscles. We tend to see a decrease in our ligament elasticity, and it's harder to build bone and muscle mass in general. However, you can do it through heavy strength training. However, in this phase of life, a lot of times women will say things like, oh, I just want to do things like aqua aerobics, or I just want to do walking. And those things are not bad. However, you need to do strength training with progressive overload with a heavy barbell. And this is the most important phase of life for you to do that heavy strength training. So now we're going to get into our 3 pillars of building muscle. The first one, as you might have guessed, and if you haven't already picked up on it, is strength training. So strength training is the most important thing you can do to build muscle. And the most important thing to do with this is to make sure that it's consistent, it's done 3 days a week, and that it's done, like I've said before, with progressive overload. And all that means is that each week it gets a little bit harder. So as your muscles adapt, essentially they get a little bit stronger each week after you've broken them down. However, if you just always stay with the same 5-pound dumbbells when you're doing bicep curls, eventually your muscles adapt and they're not gonna get any stronger or bigger. And so you really need to be progressively overloading that weight. It doesn't have to be big jumps from one week to the next. It could be a 1/2 pound. But it's really important that the stimulus continues to get a little bit harder each week. The next thing you need to do is you need to really focus on the lifts that are gonna give you the most bang for your buck. So compound lifts like the squat, the deadlift, the overhead press, all of these use multiple joints and multiple muscles, and they're super time efficient and effective for building strength. So if you're just over here doing, tricep extensions all day, trying to work your triceps, it's not gonna be nearly as efficient as if you do a push-up where you're working your pecs, you're working your shoulder stabilizers, you're working your triceps and your core, all at the same time, and you're gonna get a lot more out of that push-up than you will doing tricep extensions all day long. At Village, we have our clients do what we call one of our big 3 lifts. And so this is the squat, the deadlift, and the overhead press. So every time they come in for a strength training workout, they are doing one of these big 3. And the reason is that we have found that when they use multiple joints and muscles at the same time, they're gonna build more strength in less time. It's also really effective at recruiting all of the muscles in your body when you do things like an overhead press. Whereas if you're just, sitting down and doing a shoulder press with a dumbbell, it's not gonna recruit nearly as many muscles, and it's not gonna be as effective at building strength. So our second pillar of muscle maintenance is protein intake. And I cannot emphasize this enough because women tend to drastically undereat protein. So the goal would be 100 grams. I think that's just an easy number for most women to grasp and actually do. And what does that actually look like in your everyday life? It means that you need to get 30 to 40 grams of protein with every meal. And you also really, to optimize strength training, you need to get at least 30 grams of protein in within an hour of your workout. So your body is primed after strength training to absorb more nutrients into the muscles. The muscles are primed to rebuild in that time. And so it's especially important to get that protein in within an hour of working out. I personally, around my workouts, have a hard time getting a full meal in with enough protein. And so often I'll do things like I'll have a cup of whole milk with a scoop of protein powder and creatine, just to ensure that I'm getting that protein in that critical time period. So the best sources of protein from an animal-based protein would be 100% grass-fed beef. So the cheapest option would be grass-fed ground beef, and that's often what we do just because it's cheap, it has a lot of nutrients in it, and you wanna look for that 100% grass-fed. You can also look for pasture-raised organic chicken. You can look for wild-caught fish, but you really wanna focus on well-sourced animal products, and you wanna make sure that you're getting those at every single meal. So another favorite of ours is a Greek yogurt. So we do an organic, whole-fat Greek yogurt, or eggs. Eggs are another really cost-effective way to get a lot of protein into your diet. Some options for some plant-based protein would be tempeh, quinoa, hemp seeds, and edamame are all good sources of protein if you don't do any animal-based protein. And the last thing would just be to supplement with protein with a high-quality protein powder. So just for a lot of people, I know it's not necessarily feasible to get protein in at every single meal. And so I always like to keep a beef stick with me that ensures that I just always have a protein snack available whenever I'm on the go. And then, like I said, a high quality protein powder, and doesn't have any additives or chemicals or fillers or things like that that are not good for your body. The third pillar of muscle maintenance is sleep and recovery. And I think this is the one that is the hardest for most people because we live in a culture where we stay up late watching TV or we scroll on our phones late, and we do things like we try to multitask and get multiple things done after the kids go to bed. I know I'm guilty of it, but what your body really needs to build muscle is 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And the hard thing with that is that you actually have to be in bed longer than that for it to actually count. So I've been using the Aura to help track my sleep over the last couple years. And what I found is that even if I'm in bed for about 8 hours, I often only get about 7 to 7.5 hours of actual sleep. It also helps to track my deep sleep, which is really when you start to get that insulin-like growth factor to help build muscle. And if you're not getting enough deep sleep, then that just won't kick in. The other component of recovery is just low-level movement. So a lot of people will not get enough movement in their day, and they often sit on the way to work, and then they sit at a desk all day, and then they come home and they sit down and eat dinner, and they sit and watch TV. And so I would encourage you to look for creative ways to add more movement into your day. So park further away when you're at the grocery store. Get a sit-to-stand desk and a walking pad. I've done that recently, and it has been a game changer for me to just be more active instead of just sitting at a desk all day. The last thing that is really important for recovery is just helping your nervous system to calm down, especially at night before bed. I hear often from clients that they have a hard time falling asleep and shutting off their brain. And so I would encourage you to look for either like a meditation or some type of deep breathing practice that you can do. One of my favorites is to do just box breathing. So I inhale for 4, I hold for 4, I exhale for 4, and then I hold for another 4 seconds. And I do this for just 2 to 3 minutes before I go to bed. And this really just helps my body to calm down. It helps prime my body for sleep, and it actually helps me to stay asleep longer at night. So you can't stop aging, but you can control how you train, how you sleep, and how you recover. Protein, sleep, and strength training, these are your levers. So pull them every single day, optimize them, and find ways to prioritize them and make them non-negotiables in your life, and your muscles will thank you for years to come. I'm Nicole Klingler. I'm one of the co-founders of Village Fitness. Go ahead and like and subscribe for more videos like this.